Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Ancient Mathoms project. I'm Onitson,
And I'm Grant Thompson, just along for the ride.
and today we bring you the finalized revisions to the first two packs of the Shadows of Mirkwood cycle, The Hunt for Gollum and Conflict at the Karak. Just to remind you, the Ancient Mathoms project is a project where Grant and I are going through the entire card pool, apparently, and offering little little boosts to a lot of the old cards that have been power creeped out of modern decks. So, and here we have the cards from two packs that we felt needed a little bit of a boost. So let's start off with the hero from A Hunt for Gollum. Grant, tell us about Bilbo Baggins.
Well, Bilbo Baggins is a 9 cost, 1 willpower, 1 attack power, 2 defense point, 2 hit point hobbit hero. And he has the ability the first player draws 1 additional card in the resource phase. Now, if you've ever seen Card Talk in the Bilbo Baggins episode, you know that we just rag on Bilbo. He is far too overcosted for what you get from him.
Absolutely, and he's been that way since the very beginning of the game. This is not a case of when he was released he was fine, but later cards just kind of eclipsed him. No, when he was released he was ridiculously overcosted. Um, and so we were faced with a dilemma. We could either reduce the cost to what it should have been. The normal formula for a hero's cost is the threat cost is equal to the sum of the stats, and Bilbo's got a about 6 cost worth of stats there. Or we could try to give Bilbo an ability that would be worth paying 9 threat for. And after a lot of internal discussion and wrangling, and finally a heavy sigh of regret, maybe, we ended up going with the threat reduction because honestly, Bilbo should have been 6 threat all along.
Yeah, he should have been. We tried to give him an ability that works similar to what he does the new tactics version. Oops, spoilers if you haven't seen Mount Gundabad yet. But try to give him something similar, but it just didn't seem to work very well. It didn't fit the card, so instead we just dropped him back down to dropped him down to 6 threat.
This means that you can play him in a Hobbit secrecy deck without putting yourself right on the edge of being able to do it. This means that you can, well, it means that you don't end up paying 3 extra threat for not actually for stats you don't actually have. And his ability was never a problem. Drawing an extra card for everybody is really, really valuable. It's just not 3 cost threat on top of his base stats valuable.
Yeah.
So, anything more to say about Bilbo? It's short, simple, sweet, to the point.
Um, I was expecting more from this being the first hero out of a new adventure pack. Now, I came into the game very early on. I think Khazad-dûm had just been announced or was about to be released when I came into the game. And this being the first adventure pack, I was like, ooh, this is Bilbo. This should be really good. And it just fell flat of the mark.
So, would your opinion have changed if it had been a 6 threat hero?
Quite possibly because of the fact that he was 9 costed, and that bumps your threat up significantly when you're looking at for stats to go along with it. I mean, I played him a lot during the early days of the game because back then I was running Lord and Leadership, so I was running Dunedain Warnings and Burning Brands, so that put him up quite a bit. But it was like, well, I can just get the same amount if I run with Denethor, I can get better stat line for it.
Right. So hopefully this new 6 threat cost version finds its way into a lot more people's decks. So the next card we decided we were going to touch was the Rivendell Minstrel. She's 3 cost with 2 willpower and 1 hit point in her original incarnation, and an ability after you play her from your hand, search your deck for a song card and add it to your hand, and then shuffle your deck. I mean, as cards go, this is not a bad card. What do you think, Grant?
No, I actually like the Rivendell Minstrel. She's a little bit squishy for those treacheries that come out to wipe the board, like the Necromancer's Reach or Evil Storm, but all in all, she's a good card.
Agreed. Um, we the original reason we decided we wanted to approach her was not because we felt she was significantly underpowered, but because she suffered from something that the designers had done in the early cycles, which was they didn't always give all the cards the traits that most made sense with them. Um, in the core set, there's a minstrel ally, Glowwine, who has the minstrel trait, and the Rivendell minstrel, despite having minstrel in the name, didn't have the trait. So we're a little bit OCD about things like that. And so we decided we were going to give her the minstrel trait. And while we were there, we also decided to give her a second hit point. Just because she is 3 costs for 2 willpower in lore, and that's a good value. But in a modern deck, that's often not enough to justify her inclusion. She ends up getting passed over, except in some very specific Noldor builds where you're fishing for certain songs. And our thought was that a second hit point would go a long way to making her competitive with other questing allies in lore. What do you think about that, Grant?
I agree with that all the way. She just needed that little extra help to keep her relevant. I mean, yes, you've got a lot of Sylvan allies that bounce in and out of play that have 1 hit point, but there's not really much in the way of doing that or need for doing that in the Noldo um, archetype. So having with 2 hit points seems the right way to go for me. Um, because otherwise you're just left with a very squishy ally.
Especially when you paid 3 cost for her.
Exactly.
Alright, you want to go over our next card, Grant?
Yeah, it is the Westfold Horsebreaker. What a mouthful that is! It is the 2 cost, 1 willpower, no attack point, 1 defense, 1 hit point, Rohan ally with an action discard the Westfold Horsebreaker to choose and ready a hero. Now, I liked this card when it came out. I didn't use it much because we had Unexpected Courage, and when we got a Khazad-dûm, Ever My Heart Rises. So I usually use them as a jump, um, or just cannon fodder for questing. How about yourself?
Um, I came into the game much later than you did, Grant. So by the time I got into the game, Rohan had a much better developed card pool, and I was very very quickly attracted to the idea of trying to build a Rohan deck. And this was one of the allies I tried to put in it. But as I got better at deck building, every single Rohan deck I built, I started trying to put this card in and ended up discarding him, ended up cutting him just because he he just wasn't up to snuff. For the same cost, I could get Unexpected Courage, which would ready my hero every round instead of just once.
Right.
So, what have we done to fix him?
Well, we've dropped his cost down to 1. So he's now a 1 cost for 1 willpower, 1 defense, 1 hit point, and with the same ability. So it comes in very, very handy. You're not actually soaking your resources in use his ability. You get it off where we can. I think I used it in Conflict at the Carrock, in our in our progression series to really see if it would work properly, and it works quite well.
As a one cost ally, he's excellent. You one cost for one willpower, he quests until you don't need him anymore, and then in an emergency, you ditch him and ready up a hero. That single, it's amazing how much that single resource uh, can make, how much a difference that can make between an ally being really quite good or an ally being just not good enough to make it into a deck.
Yeah, definitely. So the next card we have is Mustering the Rohirrim. If you want to take that one, mate.
Mustering the Rohirrim is a one cost event uh, with an action, search the top 10 cards of your deck for any one Rohan ally card and add it to your hand, then shuffle the other cards back into your deck. This card is. Well, what this card is, I think, is disappointing. It came out in the same pack as the Eagles Are Coming, which is zero cost to search the top 5 cards of your deck and grab all the Eagles you find. And this one, you actually have to spend a resource and you only get a single ally. Has that been your experience with it, Grant?
Yeah, I mean, I never really used it due to the fact that I was never one for building a solo archetype well, until fairly recently. I mean, yes, I built the power dwarf decks, but they weren't solely based on dwarves. I had other allies in there, but the Rohan archetype I never really functioned with up until um, ooh, probably Voice of Isengard when that came out. I mean, I took a little bit of a break around then from the community, and then came back just before Dream Chaser, and then went away for about 6 months, and then come back, and I'm back in the community. But I found this really disappointing when I did try to build a Rohan deck. I mean, yes, I got one ally, but comparing that to other effects, it was less than desirable.
So, in order to fix it, we've first lowered the cost by one, and our original instinct was just to make it the Eagles Are Coming, but for Rohan, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Just look at the top 5 cards and pull all the Rohan allies into hand, and that we got some feedback on it from the community, and that one just wasn't as popular. It was a very good card, and people put it into their decks, and nobody liked it because it was boring and the same as the Eagles Are Coming. It was just a carbon copy.
Yeah,
And so we listened to that feedback, and you want to read what we came up with?
can do. Let's see. Search the top 10 cards of your deck for a Rohan ally and add it to your hand. Then you may spend 2 leadership resources to search the entire deck for a Rohan ally and add that to your hand. Shuffle your deck. So, what did you think of this version?
I'm quite excited to try this version out. It hasn't hit the table yet in our progression series because we're only 2 quests in, and the Rohan archetype does not yet have enough allies to use this card effectively yet. But I think that this is going to be a lot better, even if you never pay the leadership resources to search your entire deck for a Rohan ally. Just grabbing one out of the top 10 cards of your deck, um, just that single cost reduction, as we saw with the Westfold Horsebreaker, is going to be really, really interesting. And 2 resources for a full deck search. There are decks that are willing to pay 3 resources to search their entire deck with Heed the Dream. And so to do 2 resources for an entire deck search, but have it be restricted to a Rohan ally, seems like a card that could win a place in a deck to me.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I mean, especially if you're running Theodred and Earman, you've got resources going spare. It's definitely one of the ones you could get a decent, like the Westfold Horsebreaker in your first one. You spend the two resources, and then you could get, I don't know, or gambling that allows you to return an ally when it's discarded. So there's pros and cons. You have to spend resources to make to win the game. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think if it were, it should work very well when we get around to testing it.
I hope so. By about the end of this cycle, we'll probably have enough Rohan allies to try building at least kind of a proto Rohan deck. And so we'll try it out for real back around then.
Yeah,
So
I'm not sure if conflict the return to Mirkwood's probably a good idea to do a proto Rohan deck, but we'll find out.
okay, that's fair. That's very fair. So from mustering the Rohirrim, we're going to move on to. So is this the worst card we've reached in the game so far?
No, I think we'll reach that with Bilbo. No, I think universally it was Brock Iron Fist that was dubbed the worst card in the game so far by both me and David. So we've already covered the worst card. The second worst card's definitely Bilbo, in my
Okay.
opinion.
So would you say this one is coming up to third place maybe?
Quite possibly. I don't know. I haven't really thought about this card in about 10 years.
It's certainly third worst, third place for where we're at in the card pool.
Yeah, definitely. For where we're at in the card pool, it's definitely on the worst, the worst end of the scale.
So I guess I'll read it. It has to be seen to be believed. It's a 4-cost tactics ally with 1 willpower, 2 attack, 1 defense, and 3 hit points. And an action: discard Bjorning Beekeeper from play to deal a damage to each enemy in the staging area. This is the part where I say, Grant, what's wrong with this card? But there's just so much.
There's just nothing right with this card. I'm sorry, but come on.
It's it's too expensive for the stats you get, but that's not a fatal flaw in a card. You can get a card that's overcosted for its stats, but you get it if it has a really, really good ability. It also has an ability that requires you to discard it from play. That's also not a fatal flaw. You can have cards that have discard abilities, and they can work very well. Uh, our new version of the Westfold Horsebreaker is a case in point. But to have a card that requires you to discard it and have that card be significantly overcosted on the amount of stats you're getting out of it is a recipe for a card that's going to end up as bonfire starter.
You're not wrong.
Not that I would recommend doing that to anybody's collection. I have not actually used my Bjorning Beekeepers as bonfire starters. I'm a completionist, and it would hurt my soul to do that. But they
Don't
are.
lie, you already did it last November.
But they're not going into a deck anytime soon. You have anything more you want to rag on this card about, or shall we go to how we decided to make it better?
Let's. I just want to say the only good thing about this card is the artwork.
Yeah, it's not some bad artwork. It's quite decent artwork.
I had to put in a good point for all its bad points.
Yes, that's true. We got to be fair and balanced here.
Exactly, or try to be.
So,
So what did we do to make it better then, David?
Um,
Sam.
so the first thing we did was we dropped its cost to 3. Um, just because I can't think of of a discard ability that would be so good that I'd be willing to discard a 4-cost ally to do it. 3-cost allies, there are some 3-cost allies I'd be willing to ditch to do some really, really interesting things, and hopefully this is it. So for 3-cost, we also boosted his willpower by 1, so his stat line is now 2 willpower, 2 attack, 1 defense, and 3 hit points. So already, this is a good deal for the stats. 3 costs for 2 willpower is just a good deal in tactics.
Yeah, definitely.
And we've given him a response. After he participates in an attack that destroys an enemy, discard Beyonding Beekeeper to deal X damage to an enemy in the staging area, where X is the destroyed enemy's threat. So we've given him an ability that still, like the original card, does damage to an enemy in the staging area. You have to attack and kill an enemy, but in theory, you could be doing quite a bit of damage to an enemy in the staging area with this card. If you're playing Shadow of the Past, you can kill a Nazgul and use it to put 4 damage on another Nazgul in the staging area. That's huge. Anyways, I'm gonna turn it over to you, Grant. What do you think about this?
I agree with you. I mean, if you look at the current card pool and you look at the current Bjornings, it doesn't give much in the way of what the others do. So this version is more likely to be seen played in my decks, the way I run Bjornings, than I would in the original version, because he's just all round garbage. So the new version, I've definitely tried in a couple of me Bjorning decks, and I've gotten them out once or twice, and I'm generally using them for questing more than I am attacking, so his response doesn't really go off. But saying that, I have used his response once.
That was kind of my impression of how this card was going to go. The ability can be huge, but it's not going to be consistently useful in every deck you play it, or in every game you play it. But that 2 willpower for 3 cost, you're going to get him down, you're going to start questing, you're going to get the quest under control because you can quest and not threat out, or not get location locked. And then when you need to, or if you decide to build a deck deliberately designed to maximize the ability, you end up you hold him back and you attack an enemy and you nuke another enemy in the staging area. So let's move on to the next card. We've got Born Aloft, a 0-cost condition attachment. Attached to an ally and an action, discard Born Aloft from play to return attached ally to its owner's hand. What do you think?
It was a bit of lackluster for me because I never really played with it, because once I've got an ally on the board, I want to keep it on the board. I don't want to return it back to my hand. Now, this card I thought about a little bit more often with when the Sylvans came in, and the slippery Sylvan archetype was found, where you bounce them in and out. It was a way to do that, but in all honesty, I still didn't use it because I think there was other benefits from using the other cards instead of this one.
Exactly. All this one does is pull the ally back, and with all the Sylvan events, it's pull the ally back to do something you already wanted to do. Cancel an attack, cancel a shadow effect, deal, even pursuing the enemy, which is probably the least played of those cards. It's deal a damage to every enemy engaged with the player. So when compared to that, Born Aloft just doesn't make the cut. Also, it's an attachment, so you have to be able to correctly predict in advance which of your allies you're going to want to be pulling back. Whereas those Sylvan events you can play whenever you want and pick the ally you want at that moment.
Yeah. So I just I'm just not sure if I ever even considered playing this in any deck. So what did we do to upgrade it?
So um, we added an effect. We were returning to the ally to our hand to do something. Um, we have we've added it so it says discard Born Aloft to return the attached ally to your hand. Reduce the cost of the next ally or event played this phase by 1 or by 2 instead if the returned ally has a printed cost of 3 or more, to a minimum of 1. So it it now lets you gives you a little bit of cost reduction, which is first off something that Tactics really probably could use.
Yeah, agreed.
And second, well, now I think it has a place in maybe even in those Sylvan decks. Take a Thranduil deck, um, put Born Aloft on your ally, discard it, return the ally to your hand, and now you're playing Thranduil's ally. I don't know, maybe a 3-cost ally like Orifin or a 4-cost ally like Rumil. You're playing it at a -1 or a -2 cost discount. That's something probably worth including. What do you think about it, Grant?
I like this new version. I mean, I thought it could have been exploited, so we've had to do quite a bit of changes to what we originally intended for this card to do. So, in all honesty, I think this one works slightly better because it's not as exploitable as the other versions. Um, and I'm actually really interested to test this out in our upcoming games.
Absolutely. Um, I especially like that it'll let you reduce the cost of an event. So if say you find yourself needing to feint an enemy attack and didn't save a resource, you can pull an ally back to your hand and feint that enemy attack. So, or other things. One of the things I was workshopping in my head as I was preparing for this episode was even if say the same sort of thing, but you needed to save a spirit resource for a test of will, but you don't have the resource. You had to spend it to get an ally out for willpower or something. You can, at the start of the quest phase, discard Born Aloft to bring some ally that you weren't using anyways back to your hand, and then reduce the cost of Test of Will by 1, so that if you need it that round, you can play Test of Will for free and cancel that treachery or that when revealed effect on an enemy. Not the most optimal play case, to be sure, but just something I was thinking, just tossing around in my head as ways that this could open up potentially interesting spaces, in addition to the obvious places of pulling back a Sylvan ally, putting in another Sylvan ally, or pulling back an ally to feint an enemy or something. So, go ahead.
I said next up we have Eon. 3 cost, 2 willpower, 1 attack, 1 defense, 2 hit points. Rohan ally with the response after Airman leaves play, ready all Rohan characters in play. So what do you think of Airman?
Ailmond is an interesting card. His response is very, very swingy. It is either almost completely useless or ridiculously overpowered, and it's more often almost completely useless than it is completely overpowered. Um, and I'm not a fan of swingy allies like that just don't work except for in one situation and then they're amazing. I think the stereotypical way to do Ailmond is to build a Rohan deck and then you sneak attack him in, and then he leaves play and readies everybody, and you quested with all of your allies and heroes, and now he's back in your hand and they're all ready for combat. The problem is that the vast majority of those Rohan allies and heroes aren't all that great at combat, and the ones that are really, really good at combat, most of them weren't good at questing.
Right, but I suppose you would use this with something like Born Aloft in when they first came out.
True.
It was a way to pull them back into your hand. You quest all out, and then you have everyone ready for the next combat phase.
That's true. And there were a few characters who had decent combat stats. Theodred has 2 attack. Um,
Dunya has 2 or 3 attack depending.
right. The Rittermark's Finest, which will be coming up, has a point of attack. So there were options, but even today Rohan is a very specialized archetype. Its questers are very good questers. Its attackers are very good attackers. It doesn't have very many really versatile allies that can both quest and attack. So what did we do to maybe boost Ailmond a little bit?
Well, we kept them the same price. We kept them the same stat line. We just give him a response. After a Rohan ally leaves play, ready a Rohan ally and give a +1 attack limit once per phase.
Um,
And we've left him with the other ability when he leaves play as well.
we have limited that to once per game, though.
I didn't see that. Yes, we did. It's limit once per game.
Um, in part, that was a thematic thing. If Ailmond is sacrificing himself and everybody's going to ready themselves up and avenge his death, then it feels really, really awkward to do that round after round after round as you sneak attack him or chump block with him and then pull him back with stand and fight. But also, once we'd given him this other ability, after a Rohan ally leaves play, ready an ally and give it +1 attack. It felt just a little bit too powerful to also have him be able to be a part of a ready every Rohan character every single turn cycle, which you could get going with him with the original version.
Yeah.
So, as far as Rohan allies go, one of the best ones to use his ability with, at least at this point in the game, is himself. He quests for 2, you ready him, and now he's attacking for 2 as well. And that's something really valuable, especially at this point in the card pool where Spirit does not have very many good attackers. What do you think about the updated version, Grant?
I think it could be very useful. I also think it could give Rohan that little extra push it needs to do a little bit more rather than their specialities, and being a lot more versatile.
So,
What about you?
well, I'm thinking that I might need to pull out all these Rohan cards we've been adjusting out of this cycle and build a Rohan deck with some of the newer Rohan cards and see if I can get a really, really, just a really good Rohan deck going now. One that just really does some awesome things. We'll find out, I guess.
Yeah. So next up we have Nor Am I a Stranger, a title attachment which is attached to a character. Attached character gains a Rohan trait for the cost of one. What do you think of Nor Am I a Stranger?
It's 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 fine. It's bland and a little disappointing, but these title cards need to exist. You need to have the ability to just give a character the Rohan trait just in case you need to. But the Haradrim cycle introduced a set of cards that gave heroes traits, noble, warrior, scout, etc. But they also had those cards draw a card when they entered play, and that makes them a lot easier to consider running in your deck because maybe you really do want to give Leadership Aragorn the warrior trait so that he can get Mighty Prowess or Vigilant Guard or something. But just being able, knowing that when you put that on him, you'll be drawing a card as well, makes it so that it doesn't feel like you've just included a wasted card that's only going to enable a combo. So I may have foreshadowed just a little bit what we're going to do, Grant. Sorry about spoiling the surprise there.
Right. The update in Nor Am I a Stranger, you draw after you play it, you can draw cards. So I think it falls in line with the rest of the trait given cards like Scout and Ranger. So I think it's a good idea. It's the same cost for all of them. So I can see it being a little bit more played. I mean, it gives the Rohan trait, so it gives them access to Eamon's ability or, um, well, Mutual Accord.
Anything else that boosts the Rohan trait?
Um, that's what I'm trying to think.
Astonishing speed,
Yeah.
and then some cards that will be coming up that we haven't gotten to yet later on in this cycle. So I don't have anything else really to say about this card. Even with this boost, I don't know how much play it will see. But as a little utility card like this, it's not a card where it's going to be the centerpiece of a deck. These none of these trait giving cards are, but if you need them, they're there. And the fact that you also get to draw a card makes it a lot easier to think of situations where it might be useful and to say, oh yeah, I could put Nor Am I a Stranger in there. Whereas I think with the earlier version, it was very easy to think, it might be nice if I could give somebody the Rohan trait, but I'm not willing to include this card because it just doesn't do enough for me.
Yeah, I agree.
Alright, so on to our final card.
Okay, that would be the Longbeard Mapmaker. The 3 cost, 1 willpower, 1 attack, 1 defense point, 3 hit point dwarf, which has an action. Spend 1 low resource to give Longbeard Mapmaker plus 1 willpower until the end of the phase.
So he's fine. He's kind of fine. If you have a lot of lore resources, he allows you to translate that into a lot of willpower for a big questing push.
Yeah, definitely. Especially during the early game with Dane, and you had like 2 low heroes with Dane Ironfoot, and you were just generating, say, you had like 10 resources by the end of the game, and you just needed that one big push to get through. You spend all 10, that's bumping him up to like 12 on his willpower from one character.
That really is kind of ridiculous. And then the
In
other annoying bit is that outside of those circumstances, he's really just not that good.
Yep, for the cost of 3. I mean, Three willpower, well, three costs for 3 hit points isn't too bad. It means that he's a damage sponge. You can soak him in archery, and with having access to the law, being part of the law sphere, you've got access to healing.
It's true. On the other hand, right, his other stats just aren't impressive, and it's not something I'd want to spend 3 resources on. With the single exception of if I was running a Dane Dwarf deck, and even there, sometimes he makes the cut, sometimes he doesn't, depending on what I'm planning on doing with my lore resources. So, what have we done to fix him up?
Well, we kept him the same price, and we've given him two. Instead of having one willpower, he has two willpower. He's got the same. All the other stats are the same, and we've just limited his action to 3 times per phase. So at most, he can get up to 6 willpower with Dane Ironfoot's boost.
Absolutely. Um, and I think, even though his ability is now limited, he's a much better card than he was. That 2 static willpower is, I think, a lot more useful than a lot more generally useful in a lot wider a much wider set of situations than the ability to do unlimited resource boosting.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and perhaps most importantly, having a little bit of extra questing power, this 2 cost for 2 will or 3 cost for 2 willpower here, means that you can. We're starting to move towards a direction where you can build a dwarf deck that doesn't require Dane Ironfoot just for the willpower boost because you just can't get willpower otherwise.
Yeah, definitely.
And I feel like that'll be important as we go forward.
Oh, definitely. Taken away from the dwarf theme of everything having to be purple Dane to make them useful is a very good idea because all the dwarves pretty much just have one willpower and one attack. So having a way of questing or dealing with enemies that doesn't revolve around purple Dane is beneficial.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's all I've got for these cards. Do you have any last words, Grant?
Join us next time where we take on Journey Through Roscabel.
Absolutely. Until then, happy questing, everybody.